Feedback-driven teams, a culture of continuous growth. In the most effective organizations, feedback is not reserved for annual performance reviews. Instead, it becomes a daily rhythm, a shared language for growth and performance. In feedback-driven teams, feedback is embedded into everyday interactions. It's how people learn, align, and evolve. Growth isn't episodic, it's continuous. Performance doesn't plateau, it's constantly optimized. Learning isn't separated from work, it's embedded into daily tasks and conversations. These teams make feedback part of their identity, which allows them to evolve faster, adapt more effectively, and remain resilient in the face of change. They don't wait for crises to reflect. Instead, they normalize feedback as an ongoing loop, listening, reflecting, adjusting. That enables each member to improve consistently while supporting collective success. This culture of openness and trust accelerates collaboration and builds strong connections across team roles and functions. Teams that adopt a feedback-first mindset truly set themselves apart in dynamic, high-performance environments. Table of contents. Welcome to this learning journey on creating and sustaining a feedback-driven team. Here's what we'll explore across the 15 core sections of this training. We begin with an introduction, setting the stage for why feedback matters and the outcomes you can expect. Next, we define what a feedback-driven team is and why it's distinct from teams that rely on reactive or top-down communication. In Why Feedback Fuels Team Excellence, we'll explore the link between feedback and high performance. Then, we'll dive into barriers to a feedback culture, followed by how to overcome feedback barriers effectively. We'll then break down the elements of a feedback-driven team and the characteristics of effective feedback, before introducing the feedback formula, a simple structure to give and receive feedback productively. From there, we examine rituals that reinforce feedback culture and how to handle feedback in remote and hybrid teams. We'll look at metrics that signal a feedback culture, emphasizing how to measure progress. Then, we'll highlight the role of the leader in sustaining the culture and walk through first steps to building a feedback culture. Finally, we close with practical tips and examples, and a conclusion with key takeaways to help you translate this into action. Let me know when you're ready for the voiceover scripts for the remaining slides. Introduction. In the most successful organizations, feedback is not a one-time event or an annual performance review. Instead, it becomes a daily rhythm, an ongoing habit that's embedded into the culture. Feedback is treated as a shared language and a trusted mechanism for growth, learning, and continuous improvement. It's not about waiting for the perfect moment. It's about creating a system where feedback flows naturally and frequently. Feedback-driven teams foster an environment where growth is continuous, not limited to sporadic check-ins or special review periods. Improvement happens all the time, not just during performance reviews. Performance is constantly optimized, as teams are able to adjust in real time based on insights and observations. And importantly, learning is embedded into daily work, making every task an opportunity to improve. As one powerful insight puts it, teams that normalize feedback evolve faster, align more effectively, and maintain resilience in the face of change. That's the true advantage of a feedback culture. Ready for slide 2? What is a feedback-driven team? A feedback-driven team treats feedback not as a formality or a corrective tool, but as a vital, everyday activity. It's expected, welcomed, and seen as a shared responsibility. In this kind of team, feedback flows in all directions. It's not just top-down from managers, it includes bottom-up insights and peer-to-peer coaching. Everyone takes part in giving and receiving feedback. Rather than hiding mistakes, team members surface them early to address issues before they grow. This openness encourages learning and proactive improvement. Wins are also recognized. Public reinforcement of good performance boosts morale and sets a standard for excellence. Importantly, learning is not a one-time event. It's continuous, active, and shared. Everyone grows together, building momentum as a unit. When feedback is woven into the fabric of daily work, it fosters a culture of psychological safety and high performance. Individuals feel empowered to improve, and the team advances as one cohesive, ever-evolving group. Why feedback fuels team excellence? Feedback is not just about correcting mistakes, it's a tool for creating clarity and connection. When feedback is shared constructively, it drives real improvement in multiple areas. First, it sharpens performance by highlighting what should be continued, adjusted, or eliminated. Instead of guessing what's working, teams get precise insights into where they stand. Second, feedback accelerates skill development. When shared in real time, it allows for immediate learning and rapid adaptation. Teams don't need to wait for quarterly reviews. They grow as they go. Third, feedback fosters alignment. With clear expectations, misunderstandings are minimized, and collaboration becomes smoother. Fourth, it builds trust. Constructive feedback reinforces care and honesty, deepening engagement across the team. And finally, feedback fuels innovation. Fast, iterative feedback loops help teams test ideas, adapt quickly, and solve problems creatively. A team without feedback is like a ship without a compass. It may be moving, but it's not steering toward excellence with intention. Barriers to a feedback culture. Despite its benefits, feedback can be difficult to implement because of common barriers, many of which are cultural or psychological. One major barrier is fear of criticism, which can make people hesitant to share honest observations. Power imbalances also play a role. Junior members may feel unsafe giving feedback to senior leaders. A lack of trust makes it harder for feedback to be received with openness. Poorly delivered feedback, especially when vague or personal, can trigger defensive responses and hurt relationships. Ego and fixed mindsets can cause people to dismiss feedback outright. Additionally, bias may skew perceptions and distort the feedback process. If feedback isn't modeled well at the top, poor role modeling spreads. Time pressures, stress, and unclear expectations often prevent people from giving or seeking feedback. Overcoming these challenges requires deliberate effort, because without addressing them, teams will struggle to build a culture where feedback feels normal, safe, and helpful. Overcoming feedback barriers. Creating a feedback-friendly team starts by breaking down resistance. First, leaders and peers must build psychological safety. When team members feel safe from judgment or retaliation, they're more likely to speak openly. Feedback should be normalized, not treated as a rare event. Next, skills need to be developed. Many people have never been trained on how to give or receive feedback constructively. Offering guidance and language makes the process smoother. Leadership plays a key role. Leaders should model vulnerability by asking for feedback themselves and showing how they act on it. A growth mindset also helps. If feedback is framed as a chance to improve rather than as a criticism, resistance decreases. Finally, establish regular expected opportunities for feedback, such as brief check-ins or team retrospectives. Over time, these actions reduce defensiveness, build trust, and reframe feedback as something positive and productive. Feedback becomes a tool for collective learning, not a threat to be avoided. Elements of a feedback-driven team. Building a feedback-driven team requires intentional design, and there are 5 core elements that must be cultivated. First is psychological safety. Team members need to feel confident that giving and receiving feedback won't lead to punishment or ridicule. Without this foundational layer, honesty disappears. Second, there must be a shared purpose behind feedback. It should be seen not as a form of judgment, but as a way to support personal and team growth. This mindset aligns everyone around development, not blame. Third is the creation of regular feedback rhythms. Instead of saving feedback for formal reviews, make it part of day-to-day rituals, quick check-ins, retrospectives, or project debriefs. Fourth, prioritize feedback skill building. Most people aren't naturally great at feedback. Equip them with tools and frameworks to do it well. Finally, leadership by example is critical. Leaders who openly seek feedback and model responsive behavior reinforce trust and signal that feedback is safe, useful, and valued. Characteristics of effective feedback. Not all feedback produces value. To truly drive performance and growth, feedback must have 5 essential characteristics. First, it needs to be specific. Instead of vague labels like, "You're too aggressive," focus on clear, observable behaviors, such as, "You interrupted the client 3 times." Second, feedback should be timely. The closer it is to the event, the more relevant and actionable it becomes. Don't wait weeks to bring up something that happened yesterday. Third, it must be actionable. It should provide a clear path forward, offering suggestions instead of just pointing out flaws. Fourth, ensure it's balanced. Effective feedback includes both praise and areas for improvement. Both are crucial for development. Lastly, feedback must be respectful. When feedback is delivered with care and consideration, people are more likely to accept and apply it. When these 5 traits are present, feedback builds trust, strengthens relationships, and accelerates individual and team progress. The feedback formula. To make feedback more effective, use a simple and powerful structure, the feedback formula. It has 4 parts. First is the situation. Clearly state the context when the behavior occurred. For example, in yesterday's client call, this anchors the feedback. Next, describe the behavior. Stick to observable actions, not assumptions or character judgments. Say, "You interrupted the customer," not, "You were being rude." Third is the impact. Explain how the behavior affected others or the outcome, such as, "It made it harder for us to hear their needs." Finally, offer a suggestion. Provide a clear, constructive idea for improvement. Try pausing more between responses. This approach ensures feedback is grounded, clear, and actionable. It avoids emotional overtones and focuses on growth. By separating what happened, how it affected things, and what to do next, the feedback formula builds clarity, accountability, and mutual respect, transforming potentially difficult conversations into opportunities for shared improvement. Rituals that reinforce feedback culture. Embedding feedback into team life requires routines that normalize it. These rituals make feedback a habit rather than an exception. Start with weekly feed-forward rounds, where team members proactively share what support they need for the coming week, what they want more of or less of. Use peer-to-peer shout-outs during meetings to publicly acknowledge helpful behaviors. These boost morale and encourage repetition of positive actions. Postmortems and retrospectives are valuable opportunities to reflect not just on technical results, but also on communication and teamwork. Introduce real-time microfeedback, quick 2-minute conversations after key interactions to address issues while they're fresh. Implement 360-degree feedback check-ins, drawing input from peers, reports, and managers alike to gain well-rounded insights. Lastly, use 1.1s as feedback touchpoints by asking, "What's one thing I could do better?" These rituals reinforce that feedback isn't a disruption. It's a standard part of how high-performing teams operate, grow, and support one another. Feedback in remote and hybrid teams. In remote and hybrid teams, feedback becomes even more essential, but also more challenging. When people aren't sharing the same space, visual cues and body language disappear. This can lead to misunderstandings or missed context. Additionally, feedback delays often occur because opportunities for spontaneous conversations are fewer. The lack of informal interaction can also make it harder to build trust, which is vital for honest feedback. To overcome these challenges, adopt key strategies. First, use video whenever possible to convey tone and emotional nuance. Second, when giving written feedback, review the tone to ensure it's clear and constructive. Third, don't wait to deliver feedback just because you're not physically present. Be timely and proactive. Also, always check for understanding, since digital communication can lead to misinterpretation. Finally, create regular feedback touchpoints, not just at the end of projects, but throughout the work cycle. These practices ensure that remote teams stay connected, aligned, and continuously improving. Metrics that signal a feedback culture. How can you tell if a team truly embraces a feedback-driven culture? Look at the data and behaviors. Start with engagement metrics. High rates of peer-to-peer feedback indicate openness and trust. Next, pulse surveys on psychological safety give insight into whether team members feel safe being honest. Another strong indicator is the uptake of development suggestions. Are people acting on the feedback they receive? That shows it's being heard and valued. Look at retention of high performers, especially those who thrive on growth. If they're staying, it's likely that feedback is helping them develop. Also, track the speed of learning and adaptation. Teams with regular feedback loops tend to pivot faster and solve problems more creatively. Beyond numbers, pay attention to qualitative markers like storytelling, shared language, and reflective behaviors. These all signal that feedback isn't just a task, it's a part of the culture. These metrics serve as a feedback loop themselves. The role of the leader in driving feedback culture. Leaders play a central role in shaping feedback culture. They are not just participants, they are the activators of feedback. First, they must regularly ask for feedback from all directions to show humility and openness. This models that feedback isn't a threat, it's a strength. Next, great leaders model vulnerability by admitting mistakes and showing how they've grown from past input. This encourages others to do the same. Leaders also need to recognize and reward feedback behaviors, celebrating people who engage constructively, give honest input, and apply feedback well. Another key role is coaching feedback skills. Leaders must teach their teams how to give and receive feedback with clarity and respect. Lastly, leaders must intervene when feedback is misused, such as when it becomes personal or punitive. By addressing such cases, they protect the integrity of the culture. Simply put, if feedback is water, the leader is the faucet. They control the flow and set the tone. Building a feedback culture. First steps. Creating a feedback culture starts with clear, intentional actions. First, co-create a feedback charter with your team. Develop shared values and norms around how feedback is given and received. This alignment builds buy-in. Second, practice microfeedback. Start small with real-time, low-stakes exchanges. This builds comfort and fluency. Third, celebrate feedback wins. Highlight stories where feedback led to positive change. This reinforces its value. Fourth, provide training and frameworks. Teach people how to use models like the feedback formula to ensure feedback is constructive and actionable. Fifth, make feedback a standing agenda item in team meetings and one-on-ones. When it's routine, it feels normal. Finally, lead with humility. As a leader or peer, ask, "What's one thing I could do better?" This models the openness you want others to follow. Remember, culture doesn't shift in one leap. It's built one habit, one exchange, and one moment of courage at a time. Conclusion and key takeaways. A feedback-driven team isn't just more productive, it's more human. It embraces the idea that everyone is growing, learning, and evolving. The most successful teams don't chase perfection. They iterate toward excellence through honest, ongoing input. The first key takeaway is the power of continuous growth. When feedback is embedded in daily work, it accelerates both individual and collective development. Second, psychological safety is non-negotiable. Without trust, feedback falters. Teams must foster an environment where people feel safe to speak up and listen without fear. Third, feedback thrives on shared responsibility. It's not just the manager's job. Everyone contributes by giving, receiving, and applying feedback thoughtfully. Lastly, a thriving culture is built by design, not by accident. Through rituals, leadership, and intentional practice, feedback becomes part of the team's identity. When feedback becomes normalized, teams unlock a cycle of trust, accountability, and continuous learning, the true engine of long-term success in any high-performance environment.